What things are misrepresented or overemphasized in movies, because if they were depicted realistically they just wouldn't work on film. There are a ton of ugly, regular people in British television. Made me realize that American movies and TV only show the top 5% of attractive people. High school students who look like freaking supermodels in their mid-20s. Landmines. They don't click and then only explode after taking the pressure off the plate. They just explode. No warning at all. Salaries are always way higher than reality. Carrie Bradshaw is the best example. She writes a tiny column once a week and can afford 1,500 shoes and a decent apartment in New York City. In reality, she would be living with her parents in New Jersey. Lawyers. Most of the job is research and they are not always in court doing cross-examination with controversial questions and soapbox closing arguments. Same with TV lawyer shows. No lawyer can actually be like Alan Shaw. The effectiveness of a silencer on a gun. Actors always brush their teeth by jamming a dry toothbrush into their mouths. Because toothpaste foam looks stupid on film, I guess. Dialogue. There are so many what was I saying? Movies would be so boring with realistic conversations. How amnesia works. It's not like you always get bonked on the head and forget everything about your life up until that moment. Wanna go for a bite to eat? Yeah. Cool, I'll pick you up later. But, when? Where? You need more details. When are you eating? Computer hacking. It's actually a rather boring convoluted process and not just a 5 seconds ending kinda thing. Video games also make hacking out to be way cooler than it is. Shoot a car with a pistol and it freaking explodes. Man. A sexual encounter always happens on the kitchen counter and lasts 11 seconds. The amount of paperwork and investigations after a car chase or police shooting. Bad Boys / Lethal Weapon would have been the first scene, and then months of admin work / investigations. You don't kill 7 people in a gunfight and go back to work as normals the next hour. Common freaking sense. It's so absolutely frustrating when fake drama happens because 2 protagonists failed to do something like text each other or just brain vomit out a sentence to be misconstrued. I slept with your sister last night. Slap, how could you? I mean, she let me sleep on the couch because I got locked out of my apartment. People with autism. There are way fewer savants than you would think based on media representation. Because nobody wants to watch a movie about a screaming kid. When somebody is watching video footage and they're at the wrong part, they press fast forward for 3 seconds, and press play at exactly the right part. Protagonist. How long will it take to get this lab result? Technician. 10 hours. Protagonist. You have 5 minutes. Technician. Fine with me. In the movies, when the hero is outnumbered 50 to 1, the bad guys attack one at a time, giving the hero a chance to fight their way out of a terribly mismatched situation unscathed. In real life, while the hero is engaged with 1 or 2 attackers, he is killed by one of the remaining 48 or 49 others. Events that always lead the main character to the point of interest, not to mention they will not hold up a full-grown adult, much less fit one, unless it was a beefy industrial system. How quickly people get knocked out, or how long they stay knocked out for. Some people are more prone to getting knocked out in less hits, but watch boxing or UFC. They take hits all day long, and in some fights nobody gets knocked out, just beaten up. Our hero vs a huge thug. Huge thug gets knocked the frick out every time. A server instantly shows up when the main character takes a seat in a restaurant. Helicopter crashes. In movies / video games you spin out of control. If the tail rotor stops working, or the engine fails or something, then you can use auto rotation to land safely. This is something that pilots are required to learn and demonstrate. Comas. Source. When I was a teenager I was in a coma for several days. 1. The way the tubes, ventilator, feeding tube, etc. are taped to your face / body is not the same way Hollywood does it. 2. A patient in a coma is not necessarily totally motionless. Just because they are moving doesn't mean they are awake. 3. Waking up. I did not yawn, stretch, and remark on how well rested I felt. From what I've been told, the first sign of me being awake had something to do with the heart monitor. 4. It took months of rehab for me to resume anything resembling a normal life. And I was only out for roughly 11 days. There's a loose correlation between the length of coma and length of rehab. More time in a coma equals more time in rehab. And by normal life I mean able to leave the house without a walker or cane. Not able to outthink and outmuscle a bunch of bad guys. Sword fights. Going into labor/giving birth. Rarely as dramatic as the movies. Injuries and deaths in movies are constantly changed into something that works for the story. Terrible injuries are shown to be no big deal, and hassles and light wounds are shown to be fatal. For example, 1. Getting knocked out and waking up hours later. In real life this is a one-way ticket to brain damage town. Even being knocked out for a few seconds, it's a big freaking deal. 2. Neck breaking equals instant death. This only happens sometimes. Most of the time breaking your neck just gives you quadriplegia. So most of the goons that an old disposes of wouldn't be dead. They'd just be laying on the ground. Alive. In agony. But paralyzed. 3. Dying instantly when shot by an arrow. The only way an arrow could kill you instantly is if it hit you in very specific parts of your body like your brainstem, your carotid artery, or maybe your big veins in the neck and upper thigh. Arrows to the chest would just incapacitate you and maybe kill you 2 weeks later when the wounds get infected. 4. Explosions. Movies show people surviving explosions a few feet from them all the time. In reality, explosions kill people all the time who look completely unburnt and intact. The shockwaves disrupt their organs fatally. 5. Punching a face. Faces are thin muscles stretched over rock hard bone. Punching a face is like punching a wall. When I did air rotations I would treat broken knuckles and fingers from fights as often as broken noses and jaws. A balls out. No limits. Punching fight would last about 4 minutes before both people had to stop in agony because their hands are broken. Pretty much anything gun related. Some people have mentioned the blowback from getting hit with a shotgun or the effectiveness of suppressors. But really it's the loudness for me. When the bad guys and good guys are firing fully automatic rifles in a parking garage and their ears aren't bleeding. No man. Guns are freaking loud. It's almost shocking how loud they are the first time you are around them. Even using a suppressor on a small caliber gun like a 10/22.2 to caliber, it is still recommended you wear hearing protection. Law firms are boring places to work. Lawyers are not slick actors, like they are on Suits or other TV shows/movies. Pretty much everything to do with firearms and explosions. My least favorite is how Newton's laws of motion go right out the window when someone fires a shotgun. Why did the guy who got shot go flying across the room, but the guy who fired it stood still? Mornings. No, I don't wake up to a fully home-cooked breakfast of eggs and pancakes every day. All my shirts aren't ironed to a pristine level and ready to go. My beautiful wife isn't wearing one of my shirts and just underwear squeezing orange juice every day. I guess waking up, hitting snooze 14 times, and ironing your shirt just enough to not get fired, and struggling out of the door don't make glamorous cinema. Actually, I guess you do see this when the protagonist has the down and depressed period of his life and the filter goes grey. Except in reality that's most people's mornings. When someone speaks into a microphone, the first word is always followed by feedback. They then step away and everything is fine without anyone doing anything. Feedback in those situations is very unlikely to happen unless the mic is being pointed directly into the loudspeaker. Feedback also goes on forever unless someone cuts it out electronically. So many movies and shows have the trope of cutting the palm of your hand when blood is needed for some sort of ritual. It originated because it was an easy place for them to hide a blood packet back when special effects weren't what they are today. However, if you've ever had a cut on the palm of your hand, you would know that's a terrible place to make a wound, because you pretty much lose the use of that hand, and it can take a while to heal. There are much better places to draw blood from, yet we still see it all the time and the characters are fine in the scenes after, or in the case of shows like Supernatural, they are making fists and fighting with no problem. CPR/defibrillators will bring a person back to life, and then they are able to get up like nothing ever happened. In reality, they are just used to keep the person alive until they get to the hospital. Lines of ancient warriors smashing into one another. people are reluctant to charge into a mass of spears. Showing up at your crush's house unannounced to express your love. That's a good way to get a restraining order. The effort guys put into being romantic. FFS. Most of the things people routinely complain about in movies would make them much worse if done realistically. Parking in, for instance, New York City. Yeah. It's absurd to always have a spot right where the character needs it, but who wants to watch 15 minutes of hunting for a parking space? Sex. Realistic sex is only sexy if you're the one having it. It is awkward and silly looking, followed by messy and off-putting if you're just watching. Sword fights. Or at least, so I assume from trying to watch Olympic fencing. I never have any idea what's going on, and leaving the viewer confused about what just happened is rarely a recipe for a quality action sequence. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Super shaky cam in Burn 2. Not finishing meals. A meal establishes a lot of relatable context for a conversation and a canvas on which to have it, but once that atmosphere and background are established, actually eating the meal is screen time you can better spend showing something else, not setting up a specific time or plan for a date. Scheduling details do not make for a fitting film, so once the important plot/character point has been established, he/she said yes, it's time to move on. Checking respective calendars, calling for babysitters, etc. are just not entertaining to watch. Firearms always making sounds. Nothing to do with reality, but it's a well understood signaling mechanism to the viewer to very quickly establish what's happening. Ditto bullets sparking off everything. Seeing sparks fly from trees is always a favorite of mine. You can't see near misses in real life, but showing near misses on screen helps reinforce the sense of danger. And both of these are facets of the same basic idea. Sure, the viewer will understand if they just see a gun, that there's a gun here, and the viewer will understand that there was a near miss if they hear the bullet whine. But it's always more powerful to engage two senses than one, so we add sound to guns and visuals to ricochets. All of this is why movies shouldn't generally strive for realism. They should strive for verisimilitude. Breaking glass bottles is a lot harder than it looks. Also, passing out is overly dramatic. It doesn't usually last long enough for you to wake up in the hospital hours later. Usually if it's from something health related, it might only be less than a minute. The movies where boy meets girl, gets rejected by girl repeatedly, then spends the rest of the movie still pursuing her until she gives in, and they're in love eternally. Maybe it happens in real life. To me it seems like stalking. Source: a guy who knows no means no. Mental illness. They have to portray all mentally ill people as intelligent killing machines. If not that, then people who creep out other people. Basically all sound effects in any movie ever. If we were to actually use accurate representations of sound, basically every movie would be terrible, and just people jumping around in costumes instead of actually, acting. Can we have the room, please? Or excuse us for a minute, and a large group of people clears the room so two can talk privately. I have never seen that happen in real life. LGBTQ+ people. We are everywhere and most of us don't put it on full blast everywhere we go. We are just as boring as everyone else. Computers don't beep during every function, but in movies they do. Intelligence in both ways. Horror won't work without stupidity. Sci-fi or future scenarios won't work without highly pretended intelligence. You can't keep walking after taking 20 bullets to the chest. Children, often very young, who are extremely observant and eloquent. Tasers and stun guns. They don't just knock people unconscious, but that's how they always work in movies. Car crashes. Usually the car does not blow up. Usually they don't roll multiple times. What they don't often show, which does happen, is people without seatbelts being ejected from the vehicle and flying through the air. It's kind of absurd looking, some might laugh at first, but then mostly the people die. Much better to show the dead person arranged dramatically, but in place inside the car, with tasteful blood, and no body parts shattered or torn off. Every misunderstanding ever. A simple 5 minutes conversation between two main characters would solve whatever conflict exists in 90% of all movies. rom-coms especially. Reversing out of a parking space. In the movies, it's always a fast and decisive move. One sweeping arc with no mid-course corrections or pausing to glance at the front bumper's clearance. Real life reversing is pretty uncinematic. Sprinkler systems. They always show every head in the building going off at once. Doesn't happen that way. People smoking weed. They always go way over the top and anyone who actually smokes weed cringes. Sex scenes in any sort of water, like a bath/shower, pools, the ocean, etc. Water is not lubricant. No breaks, no food, no bathroom, just boundless energy from the characters. I guess losing energy is boring to watch. I think it can be done right. After sex. Opiate addiction. The vast majority of addicts appear to be normal people who get the flu a lot and spend a lot of time in the bathroom. X-match in a moments, where people just show up at the perfect pinpoint moment for something. Taxes. It's more exciting than movies make it out to be. Pretty much everything in westerns. Gunfights were rare, and most gunfights were wasted shooting at and missing each other with incredibly crappy revolvers that wheat, just as likely to explode in their hand. Most towns and certainly cities had local laws regarding guns, not that much different than now. Being in a burning building, space is very quickly filled with impossible to see through and very toxic smoke. But crawling with your face on the ground in total darkness doesn't make for good film. People playing video games. You don't squirm and wriggle half as much as films make out. But I guess it would be pretty boring scene if it was a person sitting there only moving their thumbs. Being gay. A friend and I were just talking about how you couldn't have a gay James Bond because there isn't a way to have him be gay and not make it his only trait. Either he's super obviously gay and that's his whole character, or it's so subtle there isn't even a point in having him be gay in the first place. I'm sure it could be done, and there have for sure been good gay characters, but it's not easy to write. Like if a character is a woman, you can discern that the second they're on screen. You can't tell at a glance if somebody is gay. They have to show it somehow, and doing that makes it feel like the film is saying you need to know this character is gay instead of just letting them be gay. Most sports competitions are translated to film horribly, especially when it is a physically imposing sport like MMA, football, or rugby. It is either incredibly poorly simulated or a jump cut fest, so we can't really see how it unfolds. Rain. They mix the water with milk, so you can see it falling in those shots of heavy rainfall. Edit, a word. Economics in general. A lot of numbers, competing theories, and you pretty much have to write out the entire field of microeconomics to make it work in a movie. I'm thinking of the worst example ever. Battlefield Earth. In the beginning of that movie a space alien crashes the US stock market by making every stock go down. This somehow leads to the complete breakdown of society. That is bad enough already, but it gets worse. Aliens did this so they could steal Earth's gold. It'd probably have been much easier to cause a gold investment bubble, pop the bubble, and then bought the gold in bulk from people who invested in it and now just want the best option they can get for it. That is just my half-assed idea as a novice at best on in the field of economics. Anyway, better than trying to crash the entire global economy. Explosions. Anyone flying a helicopter with dramatic and aggressive yanks and pulls on the cyclic, rotor pitch/left and right movement, and the collective. These controls take subtle and small movements to enable the helicopter to respond, not what you see in movies. Internal thoughts and feelings being depicted poorly by over-exaggerated facial expressions. So many books are translated to film poorly because you can't convey how a character is thinking or reflecting on the action, and how that in turn shapes their response. Anything medical. My wife and I both work in the medical field and are always rolling our eyes at doctors defibrillating a flatline and such. How incredibly spotless, clutterless clean people's homes are. No average person's home is that clean and organized, especially with kids.